They say that blood is thicker than water, but for Clara Mason, love was not a matter of lineage, but of survival. When a woman finds a child in the storm, she does not ask for his pedigree, she asks for a blanket. But what happens when the child you saved belongs to a world that would burn you to ash just to get him back? What happens when the little boy holding your hand is the only thing standing between a kingdom and chaos? This isn't a fairy tale of lost princes. This is a story of a woman who dared to steal a king's son just to be his mother. If you enjoy stories of forbidden secrets, royal scandals, and love that defies the crown, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. Let me know in the comments, if you found a royal secret, would you sell it for a fortune or keep it to protect the innocent? Now, let us step into the fog of London. Part 1. The Child at the Gate. The London fog was not merely weather, it was a living thing. It curled around the gas lamps of Mayfair and settled heavily into the rookeries of the East End, muting the world into a damp, grey silence. Clara Mason pulled her shawl tighter against the biting chill. It was a threadbare thing, wool worn thin by years of service, but it was all she had. At 24, Clara had resigned herself to the invisible life of a nursery maid. She was neither a beauty nor a bold adventurer. She was practical. She was the steady hand that wiped tears and the soft voice that sang lullabies to children who would one day grow up to ignore her in the street. She was hurrying back to the Somerton household, her boots splashing through puddles that reflected the dreary sky, when she heard it. It was not the cry of a cat, nor the shout of a drunkard. It was a singular, terrifyingly lonely sound, a whimper. Clara stopped by the wrought iron gates of a shuttered park. Tucked into the shadows of the ivy-covered brickwork, a bundle lay amidst the fallen, rotting leaves. Heart hammering against her ribs, Clara knelt. She peeled back the edge of a sodden velvet blanket, far too fine for the gutter, and found a pair of wide, storm-grey eyes staring up at her. The boy could not have been more than 2 years old. He was shivering so violently his teeth clicked together. "Oh, you poor scrap," Clara breathed, the instinct to comfort overriding the logic of self-preservation. She scooped him up. He was heavy, solid, and burning with fever. As she adjusted her grip, something cold and hard pressed against her wrist. She glanced down. Encircling the child's small, pale wrist was a bracelet. It was not a trinket from a market stall. It was heavy gold, intricate and old, comprised of interlocking links that formed a chain of thorns. In the center sat a medallion, a lion rampant roaring against a field of rubies. Clara gasped. She knew that crest. Every soul in England knew that crest. It was the private sigil of the royal house, specifically the king's personal line. Panic, sharp and acrid, rose in her throat. To be found with this child was theft. To be found with royal property was treason. But as the wind howled through the alley, the boy buried his face in the crook of her neck and let out a sigh that sounded painfully like "Mama." Clara looked left, then right. The street was empty. "I have you," she whispered, a fierce, sudden heat blooming in her chest, melting the chill of the rain. "I have you, and I will not let the cold take you." She tucked the golden bracelet deep into the folds of his sleeve, wrapped him inside her own shawl, and ran. 3 years later. The Somerton country estate, nestled in the rolling green hills of Derbyshire, was a world away from the grime of London. Here, time moved with the slow, sweet rhythm of the seasons. "Leo, if you chase the geese again, the cook will have your hide, and I shall not save you." Clara stood on the edge of the kitchen garden, wiping flour from her hands onto her apron. A boy of 5, with hair the colour of spun midnight and eyes that held the grey fury of a storm, came tearing around the hedges, laughing. "They started it, Clara!" Leo shouted, crashing into her skirts and wrapping his arms around her legs. Clara looked down at him, her expression softening into that helpless adoration she had tried, and failed, to temper over the years. She was nominally the nursery maid for the Somertons' own brood, but the household had accepted Leo as a distant relation of hers, a charity case allowed to live in the servants' quarters. He slept in a trundle bed beside hers. He ate the crusts of her bread. He was, in every way that mattered, her son. But the bracelet lay hidden beneath the floorboards of her small attic room, wrapped in oilcloth, a sleeping dragon. Lately, the quiet of the countryside had been pierced by whispers from the capital. The peddlers and postboys brought news. The king was ailing, the succession was in crisis, and most terrifying of all, the rumours of the lost prince, a child born of a secret union, spirited away or stolen, were no longer just tavern gossip. They were becoming a hunt. "Up with you now," Clara said, smoothing Leo's hair. "Mrs. Higgins needs the herbs for the roast. The master has a guest tonight, a gentleman from London." Leo's face fell. "London? That is where the smoke lives." "And the king," Clara murmured, more to herself than him. A shiver walked down her spine, though the sun was warm. "Stay in the kitchen tonight, Leo. Out of sight. Promise me." "I promise," he said, solemnity, though his eyes danced with a curiosity that always frightened her. That evening, the Somerton house was ablaze with candlelight. Clara was pressed into service to help serve the wine, as the household was short-staffed. She moved like a ghost around the mahogany table, pouring vintage claret, her eyes downcast. The guest, Sir Julian Thorne, was a man who seemed to suck the oxygen out of the room. He was not old, perhaps 30, with a face carved from granite and eyes that were too sharp, too observant. He wore the silks of a courtier, but carried himself with the stillness of a hunter. "The capital is in an uproar," Sir Julian was saying, his voice a rich baritone that carried easily. "The Queen Consort is displeased. She claims the king's mind is going, but His Majesty insists the child lives. He insists he felt the blood connection break and then retether. Superstition, surely. A lost bastard is hardly news." "Not a bastard," Sir Julian corrected softly, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Clara's hand trembled. A single drop of wine splashed onto the white tablecloth. "Clumsy girl," Mrs. Somerton hissed. "Apologies, madame," Clara whispered, terrified to look up. "Leave it," Sir Julian said. His gaze shifted to Clara. It was heavy, physical. "Tell me, do you find it difficult to find good help this far north, Somerton?" "She is usually reliable. Raising a foundling of her own, perhaps it distracts her," Mr. Somerton said dismissively. Sir Julian went still. A foundling? Clara's heart slammed against her ribs like a trapped bird. She backed away, bowing. "I will fetch a fresh cloth." She fled to the kitchen, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She needed to find Leo. She needed to check the floorboard. She felt the net closing in, woven of gold and blood. She found Leo sitting by the hearth, playing with a wooden soldier. He looked up, smiling, but before she could speak, the heavy oak door of the kitchen swung open. Sir Julian Thorne stood there. The kitchen staff froze. "My apologies," the nobleman said, his voice smooth as velvet, though his eyes were scanning the room. "I lost my way to the library." His gaze landed on Leo. Leo, possessing that innate, terrifying confidence he had never learned from Clara, stood up. He did not bow. He simply looked at the stranger. Sir Julian took a step forward. He looked at the boy's black hair. He looked at the storm-grey eyes. And then his gaze dropped to the boy's wrist. Leo was not wearing the bracelet, but he was rolling up his sleeves to wash in the basin, and there, pale against his sun-browned skin, was a birthmark, a jagged, distinct mark just above the pulse point. It looked exactly like a crown. Sir Julian's breath hitched. It was a microscopic sound, but to Clara it sounded like a cannon blast. He looked at Clara. The indifference was gone from his face, replaced with a predatory intensity that made her knees weak. He didn't say a word about the king. He didn't shout for guards. He simply smiled, a cold, terrifying expression. "A handsome boy," Sir Julian said, softly. "He has the look of history about him." Clara stepped in front of Leo, shielding him with her body, her chin lifted, her eyes blazing with a mother's protective fury. She was a nursery maid, facing a wolf of the court, but in that moment she was formidable. "He is just a boy, my lord," Clara said, her voice steady despite the terror gripping her throat. "My boy." Sir Julian tipped his head. "We shall see." He turned and left the kitchen, the heavy door clicking shut behind him. But Clara knew. She knew by the set of his shoulders, by the gleam in his eye. The hunt was over. The game had begun. Part 2. The Court and the Question. Sir Julian Thorne's departure from the kitchen did not bring peace. It brought a chilling, insidious surveillance. He remained a guest at the Somerton estate for a fortnight, claiming to be enjoying the country air. Yet he spent his days hovering at the edges of the household, a shadow dressed in fine broadcloth. Clara felt his eyes on her constantly, in the corridors, in the garden where she supervised the children, and most acutely whenever Leo was near. It was not the gaze of a man attracted to a servant, but the calculating assessment of a scientist studying a specimen he was about to dissect. The silence between them was an agonizing pressure cooker. Clara continued her duties with a forced mechanical precision. She scrubbed the floors harder, polished the silver brighter, and held Leo tighter at night. Her heart was a cold, hard knot of fear, but she was fortified by a single unwavering purpose. She would not let this man take her son. One rain-swept afternoon, she found Sir Julian in the dusty, neglected library, ostensibly reading an ancient folio. "Miss Mason," he said without looking up, his voice dangerously soft. You have a remarkable way with the children. The Somerton boy, Theodore, is practically tame." Clara stood stiffly. "I merely offer routine, sir. Children thrive on order." "Indeed, order. And where does the little foundling, Leo, fit into your routine?" He finally lifted his head, pinning her with those relentless grey eyes. "He doesn't have the Somerton look, nor yours, if I may say so. He carries himself with a certain authority." "He has no authority," said Julian. "He is a boy of the kitchen." Clara retorted, her hand gripping the feather dusters so hard her knuckles were white. "The king's grandson also started life as the boy of the kitchen, Miss Mason. History is rife with such inconvenient truths." He leaned back, crossing one leg over the other, the picture of casual menace. "The king is near death. The queen consort, as you may know, has no children. She is eager to secure the succession for her own lineage, which means suppressing any claim that contradicts hers, particularly the claim of the king's late son's child." The words landed on Clara like stones. The king's hidden heir. The rumors were not just true, they were the fulcrum of a political crisis. "You are speaking treason, sir," Clara whispered, stepping back. "I am speaking truth to the woman who stole the kingdom's only hope," he countered. Rising slowly, he walked toward her, stopping a respectful but intimidating distance away. "That bracelet you hid under your floorboards, the one with the lion and the rubies, is more than a piece of jewelry. It is the proof. The king had it commissioned for his son's heir. Only 3 people knew it existed: His Majesty, the late prince, and I." Clara felt the floor tilt. Her breath left her lungs in a sharp rush. This was not a foundling. This was a prince. This was the key to the throne. And she, a simple nanny, was guarding him. "You must take him and leave," Sir Julian continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. "The Somertons are loyal to the crown, but not to the king. They are aligned with the queen consort. She believes the child is a myth. If she finds him, she will not simply remove him. She will erase him." He paused, letting the weight of the threat settle upon her. "I know where my duty lies," Clara said, finding her voice, though it cracked, "and it is to protect the boy." "Then you and I are on the same side, Miss Mason, though I cannot promise to remain there," Sir Julian admitted. "My true duty is to the crown, which means locating and securing the heir before the Queen's agents do. The clock is ticking, and the shadows are deepening." In the days that followed, the relationship between Clara and Sir Julian transformed into a strained intellectual alliance. He needed information, she needed protection. Their stolen conversations took place in the library, in the shadowy pantry, or late at night by the dwindling kitchen fire. He was an aristocrat, she was a servant, yet the desperate stakes leveled the playing field. He began to see past the worn shawl and the capable hands to the fierce intelligence and profound morality within her. She saw past the courtier's polish to the deep, weary loyalty beneath. He was risking his life to protect his sovereign's dying wish. "You have kept him safe for 3 years," Sir Julian said one evening, watching the firelight play over her earnest face. "No man of the court could have done better." "A mother's vigilance is sharper than a king's guard," she replied, her eyes never leaving the doorway. "You are not his mother, Miss Mason." "I am the only one who taught him to read, the only one who has soothed his nightmares. He cries for me, not for a crown," Clara said, standing firm.
And yet, if he remains here, he will soon cry only once more, Sir Julian countered, the harsh truth striking her like a blow. I have delayed my return, that the Queen's most trusted adviser, Lord Ashcroft, is headed this way. He doesn't investigate, he executes. Clara finally faltered. What do you propose? You must bring him to the capital, to the King's personal, guarded residence in Westminster. But the only way to get through the city, past the Queen's lookouts, is for you to appear as one of us. He produced a small leather pouch. It contained a king's ransom in coin and a folded document stamped with the faded royal seal. This is a royal mandate, he explained. It offers you safety, wealth, and a title, perhaps Lady Mason, if you reveal the boy's location to the king. The full wealth of the monarchy is yours. He paused, his gaze softening almost imperceptibly. Or, if you refuse, and the Queen finds him first, the mandate becomes an order for your immediate exile, without currency, without papers, into the colonial territories. You will never see England or Leo again. Clara stared at the pouch, her mind reeling. Money, safety, security for a lifetime. She could secure her future and simply send an anonymous note to Sir Julian, revealing Leo's whereabouts, fulfilling her duty without risking her life. The money means nothing to me, Clara stated, pushing the pouch back across the table. Then what does? The choice. Clara's voice was low, taut with emotion. You offer me protection in exchange for the child's whereabouts, but you still treat me like a tool. I need to know why the Queen wants him gone. Why is he such a threat? He is only 5. Sir Julian hesitated, his eyes betraying a deep, long-held sorrow. He is not the King's grandson, Clara, Sir Julian confessed, using her given name for the first time, the intimacy shocking her. He is the King's younger brother, secretly sired by the King's late father on a forbidden union with a woman of the common gentry. The King discovered the truth of his brother's existence, a true, full-blooded sibling born out of wedlock, but acknowledged in a private, legal document. Leo, or rather Prince Leopold, is not the King's heir, but his equal. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. He is the true king, if His Majesty dies without issue. He has the strongest claim to the throne, bypassing even the Queen's family and the distant cousins. The late prince knew this, and on the night of his death, he ensured his infant brother was spirited away before the Queen could dispose of him. The child you found was never meant to be lost. He was meant to be found by someone who loved him for his own sake. Clara sank onto a stool, the sheer magnitude of the secret crushing her. She had not raised a missing relative. She had raised a rival sovereign. Sir Julian stepped forward and placed his hand on her shoulder, a gesture that was both reassuring and possessive. The true choice, Miss Mason, is this. You can reveal his location now, save yourself, and trust the fractured court to protect him. Or you can take the wealth, refuse the exile, and bring Prince Leopold to the king on your own terms. But that journey will be perilous. You will be hunted by a queen who will not stop until the bloodline ends with her. Clara looked out into the darkness, picturing Leo asleep, his small hand tucked under his cheek. The gold and the exile were irrelevant. The king's true brother, a life of danger, of plotting, of cold, isolating power. She stood up,
her jaws set with a fierce resolve that eclipsed the courtier's own authority. "I will not take the exile," she stated firmly, "and I will not take the money." She picked up the velvet pouch and thrust it back into Sir Julian's hand. "I have not stolen a prince, Sir Julian. I have guarded my brother, and I will deliver him to the king only when I can ensure his safety is absolute, not merely promised." She looked him in the eye, and he saw not the nanny, but the woman who had already survived the Queen's best efforts to lose the boy 3 years ago. "The carriage leaves at dawn. We leave now before Lord Ashcroft arrives. Tell Leo you are taking him on an adventure. And, Miss Mason, do not forget the bracelet." The decision was made. Duty had become sacrifice. Now she faced the dangerous truth of her commitment and the perilous journey toward a confrontation that would decide the fate of both the child and the crown. Part 3. The Choice of a Mother. The journey from Derbyshire to Westminster was a tightrope walk over an abyss. Clara and Sir Julian travelled under the shroud of anonymity, moving by night and resting in isolated coaching inns by day. Leo, energized by the promise of adventure, was oblivious to the armed riders they occasionally spotted on the horizon, all the constant, silent tension thrumming between his 2 protectors. Sir Julian had procured Clara gowns of simple, respectable quality, a disguise that made her feel dangerously exposed. He insisted she abandon the uniform of servitude, stating that a common maid was easier to dismiss than a well-dressed woman of discretion. She played the part of a distant, capable relation, but every time Sir Julian referred to Leo as the young master, the title felt like a stolen jewel pressing against her conscience. Their covert alliance had intensified into something deeply complex. Sir Julian, the rigid courtier, found himself captivated by Clara's unwavering moral compass. He saw the fierce, maternal love that superseded political ambition, and it resonated with a part of his own duty-bound heart he thought long dead. "You look tired, Miss Mason," Sir Julian observed late one night as they paused at an inn outside of London. Leo was asleep in the room next door. "It is the weight of the secret," Clara admitted, wringing her hands. "He is so small, Sir Julian, and you tell me he is the cornerstone of the realm. What if I fail him?" "You have already succeeded. You kept him breathing, safe, and loved, when the whole of the palace was convinced he was dead. The king needs the truth delivered by someone he can trust. He needs the proof of his brother's identity, but he needs the witness to his brother's character even more." His gaze held hers, the intensity of their shared secret pulling them together like magnets. "If you do this, Clara, you will secure his place, but you will lose your own." "I know," she whispered, the sacrifice already accepted. They arrived in London under a bleak winter sun, slipping through the back gates of the king's private residence, a small, heavily fortified manor adjacent to the palace. The air inside was thick with illness and anxiety. They were ushered immediately into the king's bedchamber. His Majesty, King George IV, was a ghost of a man, frail and diminished, propped up against silk pillows. The Queen Consort, a woman whose beauty had curdled into bitter ambition, stood by his bedside, guarded by her adviser, the ominous Lord Ashcroft. The room was silent, save for the shallow, rattling breaths of the king. "Thorne, you return at last," the Queen said, her voice dripping with poisonous sweetness.
And you bring a nursemaid and a child. How very rustic." Sir Julian bowed low. "Your Majesty, I bring the child of whom the king speaks, the missing brother, Prince Leopold." A stir ran through the handful of physicians and guards present. Lord Ashcroft stepped forward, his face a mask of cold hostility. "This is a preposterous fabrication, a vagrant child, smuggled in by a disgraced courtier and a desperate servant, to prey on the king's delirium. Take them, all three, to the Tower." "No!" The king's voice was a rough rasp, but it held the command of a sovereign. "Bring the boy closer." Leo, clutching Clara's hand, walked toward the immense bed. He was not frightened. He looked at the king with open, curious grey eyes. The king looked not at the regal bearings Sir Julian had hoped to display, but at the child's easy trust. "Leopold," the king breathed, reaching a trembling hand toward the boy. The queen, seeing her power dissolving, moved swiftly. "The king is confused. Nursemaid, who are you? Tell us who paid you to invent this treasonous lie." Clara, facing the full, terrifying power of the crown, released Leo's hand and stepped forward. "I am Clara Mason, Your Majesty. I found the boy. I have protected him. I have never asked for payment, nor will I. I have come to make an exchange." "An exchange?" Lord Ashcroft laughed dryly. "What could a nanny possibly possess to exchange with a king?" Clara looked at the dying monarch, not at the courtiers. "I possess the truth, Your Majesty. I possess the proof of his blood and the integrity of his heart, and I refuse to exchange him for gold or title. I refuse the exile you prepared for me." She reached into her bodice and produced the folded oilcloth, removing the massive, ancient gold bracelet. She knelt before the king and presented it. "This is the sigil of your father's line, Your Majesty. It was on his wrist the night I found him. It proves he is your brother, Prince Leopold." The king took the heavy bracelet, the rubies catching the light. He looked at the craftsmanship, then at Leo's profile and the faint, hidden birthmark. A single tear rolled down the king's cheek. "It is my brother. The spirit is the same." The queen was incandescent with rage. "This is not enough. A nanny's word, a bracelet can be forged." "The bracelet is proof of identity," Clara insisted, rising to face the queen, her simple gown giving her an unexpected moral stature. "But the boy needs more than an identity, Your Majesty. He needs a future that is safe. He is a king's brother, yes, but he is still a child." She spoke directly to the king, her voice ringing with protective steel. "I will reveal every detail of his past 3 years and vouch for his right to the throne, but only if you grant me one promise, Your Majesty, that Prince Leopold's safety is secured, not by your court, but by a legal document placing him under the protection of the crown and demanding that I remain his guardian until he reaches majority." Silence descended, heavy and absolute. She was not demanding wealth. She was demanding responsibility. She was demanding the right to fulfill her duty as his mother. "You demand a place at court," the queen spat, utterly incredulous. "You demand this insolence." "I demand his safety,"
Clara repeated, and the continued presence of the only person he trusts, the only person who knows that, though he will one day rule, he still prefers his milk warm and his stories read twice. The king, stirred by the impossible courage of the woman and the undeniable love radiating from her, looked at Sir Julian. Thorne, the king commanded, his voice gaining a sudden, fierce strength. Draft the document. Now. She speaks the truth of a protector, not a thief. The document was swiftly, legally drawn up and witnessed. The king, using the last of his strength, signed his assent, the scrawl a validation of both his brother's claim and Clara's protection. Within the hour, the king passed away, his final act securing the future of the kingdom and the life of his little brother. The Queen and Lord Ashcroft were immediately contained, their plot to seize power dissolved in the wake of the king's dying will. The moment the king's passing was announced, the political upheaval was intense, but Prince Leopold's succession, protected by the king's final, undeniable decree, was secured. Clara Mason, the humble nanny, was instantly elevated by the royal mandate to the position of guardian to the king's brother, Prince Leopold, Duke of Kent. She was given apartments in the palace, a generous stipend, and the genuine, if wary, respect of the court. Her reward was not titles or riches, though she had both, but the simple, profound joy of watching Leo thrive, knowing she was the anchor to his immense, frightening world. Months later, on the day of Prince Leopold's official investiture, Clara stood beside the throne. Leo, overwhelmed by the grand ceremony, suddenly broke from the line of dignitaries. He ran past the bowing lords and curtsying ladies, ignoring the gilded crown that awaited him. He ran straight to Clara, burying his face in her skirts. "I need you, Clara," he whispered into the velvet of her gown, the weight of the moment momentarily crushing his 5-year-old shoulders. Clara knelt, pushing the ceremonial hat back from his brow. She looked at the young face, the face of a royal brother, a future ruler, and saw only the abandoned boy she found in the rain. "I am here, my love," she murmured, a genuine private sentiment in a room full of political theatre. "I will always be here." Sir Julian Thorne, now elevated to the prince's chief adviser, watched the exchange from the side. He saw the genuine devotion that held the kingdom's destiny in place. He had sought the rightful heir through duty. Clara had secured him through love. Later, as they walked through the endless corridors of the palace, Sir Julian stopped her. "The court calls you Lady Mason now," he said, his voice low. "But I call you the only honourable person I have ever known. You had the chance to take gold and safety, but you chose burden and devotion." He reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her cheek, a gesture that was utterly, wonderfully improper. "You are more than a guardian to him, Clara. You are his mother in truth." "And you, Sir Julian," she replied, her heart beating a wild tattoo against her ribs, "are the only man who knew how to find what was truly lost." The shadow of duty that had haunted them both was finally lifted, replaced by a deep, undeniable admiration. He, the man of the court, found his truth in her common, unshakable goodness. She, the woman of the servants' hall, found her strength recognized by the most loyal heart in the kingdom. The secrets were over, the throne was safe, and a love born not from fairy tales, but from fire, danger, and shared sacrifice was finally free to begin.